Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar today, where we have Raiffeisenbank and Wultra together with iProov, talking about securing identity for financial services. I'll start briefly by introducing myself and setting some ground rules for this webinar. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, please ask questions. This is very much intended to be interactive, so if there are areas we're not covering, or indeed if there are areas we are covering but you'd like some more detail on, then please put them in the Q&A, which you should find in your browser. So ask a question and then we will try to answer all the questions on the webinar. If we're unable to cover the question, if you leave your contact details with the question, which will only be visible to the panelists, not to everybody else on the webinar, then we will make sure we respond to you at a later date. I'm Dominic Forrest. I'm the CTO of iProov. iProov, as many of you will know, is the world's leading biometric face liveness company, and Wultra and Raiffeisenbank are partner and customers of ours, and we're going to talk about their solution and how they make use of us in some detail today. Petra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure, absolutely. Thank you very much for the warm introduction. My name is Petr Dvořák. I am the CEO and founder at Wultra, which is a cybersecurity company that specializes in post-quantum authentication. That's our latest and greatest way how to build trusted systems, especially for financial institutions. We are a specialized company headquartered in Prague in the Czech Republic. And as mentioned, Raiffeisenbank is also our customer. So we would love to discuss their very successful case study today.
That's great, thank you. And Vratislav?
Yes, my name is Vratislav Kříž, and I'm product owner of mobile banking in Raiffeisenbank, Czech Republic. Just briefly like this.
That's great, and we'll get quite a lot more detail about your role and the way your role in the bank and the way you make use of iProov and Wultra later in this webinar. I'm going to spend just a few minutes, if I can, setting the scene for this and talk about the role of biometrics in securing online banking, and particularly in fraud prevention, given how much news there has been recently and the rapidly changing threat landscape, particularly in and around AI-based deepfakes. So we've also all seen vast amounts of news about the amazing things that AI can do, and also some of the challenges which we all face as a result of AI. I think what is perhaps less recognized is just how fast the criminals, the fraudsters are to adapting new technology and making use of it to attack organizations in ways that we've not seen before and with a sophistication we've not seen before. Just as an example, if we talk about deepfakes, I've spent much of the last decade or slightly more than a decade of my life looking at attacks on face biometric systems. And what we've seen over the previous 12 months is massive rise and acceleration in AI-based attacks, which are now got at the stage where they're trivial to perform. So that a typical gaming PC with a reasonable GPU in, which you'll find, in many houses with gamers, can actually create a deepfake, taking the real person, such as myself, and overlaying somebody else's face on it to a degree that by the human eye, I at least can no longer tell the difference. And I think it's gone from a stage where it's very difficult for people to do, required immense amounts of skill and vast amounts of computing power, whereas now an average teenager with their gaming PC can download some open source software or a free tool and actually carry out this type of sophisticated attack, from start to finish in 30 minutes with no real skill set. And after that, having set it up in 30 minutes, it can be repeated on an ongoing basis, either real time or by fully automating it with software so that the image can be scraped off LinkedIn or Twitter or from any other source and applied at scale to attack any sort of system that is dependent upon face. So that could be a video call, if it's such as a Zoom call or a Teams call, or it could indeed be some of the systems that we use to secure our eKYC systems, or indeed ongoing authentication systems around the world. Where it has changed in terms of ease, it has also changed in terms of quality. And it is that quality that I think is massively understood. And as always, the criminals have picked up on this change very, very quickly and had much success in fraud around the world against companies, some of whom have been kind enough to talk about that and share their knowledge on their learning from that, where perhaps they've been had deepfakes used to attack them, either by impersonating members of the board, for example, on video calls, or indeed they've ended up employing people with remote interviews who turn out not to exist. So what I'd like to do now, if I can, is hand over to Petra and just ask you to talk to us for a few minutes about how banks can balance the robust security which we all need against this user experience, and particularly the seamless user experience which customers of yours such as Raiffeisenbank demand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are an authentication company, so we were always struggling with this topic of how to get people in the system, how to either onboard new customers or how to reactivate mobile application when people lose the smartphone. And we always had these slightly silly discussions about what to do if people forget their password. Should we introduce some other password that they will not forget for any reason? And these discussions didn't really help us move anywhere. And initially, we had implemented activation in the internet banking, meaning that people had to somehow log into the internet banking, scan a QR code in the internet banking, and then they can use mobile application, which in 2014 made quite a good sense because internet banking was the primary digital channel for the bank. Mobile banking was still emerging. I think that first mobile banking was introduced in 2011, so relatively recently. And we always saw the internet banking as the bigger, more robust digital channel, so mobile was always a bit underestimated. But now the situation is completely different. Mobile is the primary digital channel. Some banks actually launched without even supporting the internet banking. Everything happens on mobile. Banks are actually considering deactivating internet banking. So everything is happening on mobile. And we can no longer have this, I would say, chicken egg problem in how we let people in to the mobile banking. And so we were looking for something that would work only on the mobile device without any additional channel. And this becomes quite challenging, really, because in theory, you need to go through multi-factor authentication, and you have 3 factors to choose from. Something person has, which unfortunately is actually quite difficult to achieve somehow reasonably. We still have to stick with SMS OTP. We can spend another hour talking about security of SMS OTPs and all possible attacks on SMS OTP. Then it is password, which is typically attacked in the same way as SMS OTP through phishing. And it is not very convenient because people forget it. If you think about it, passwords are kind of broken today on the internet because people should choose long random password, very long, very random password, unique for each service. And we are just not built for it. People don't remember those passwords. So they use password managers, which makes the password kind of not really a knowledge element anymore. It's more of a possession element, right? And then we have biometrics. And surprisingly, or rather non-surprisingly, because this is the aim of the webinar, we actually found quite a beauty in using combination of, for example, SMS OTP with facial biometrics, which, to be frank, is about as secure as just facial biometrics. We have the SMS OTP mainly for compliance reasons, for complying with requirements on strong customer authentication under PSD2. And facial authentication, the reason why we didn't always use it, it's because it's relatively new. A little bit of history again. I'm a bit of a zealot, and I would say like a historical figure in mobile development. Face ID was introduced in 2017 with iPhone X, Before that, we generally didn't use much of a facial biometrics on smartphones. It was rare to see it. And in less than a decade, we actually managed to build like a really robust facial biometric systems that are able to work extremely quickly, extremely reliably, but at the expense of, let's say, selecting the right one correctly. Because with the evolution of AI and with the evolution of tools that we have available, anyone can build it now. Anyone can build facial authentication relatively quickly. It's a very quick exercise. It can be actually an integration exercise with some of the tools available there, and you don't really have to build it from scratch. But then, the user friendliness is there. We can use just Face ID, facial biometrics with SMS OTP. But how secure is it really, right? And so typically what we see at banks is that they often say, okay, we have some facial biometrics and it works. But we ask them, how do you know it works? And they don't know. They don't have any like measurements and statistical characteristics. They just have this very rudimentary experiment. They tested it themselves and they gave it to their friend. And surprisingly, it really worked as expected. It let the right person in and didn't let the wrong person in at the same time. But that's not the point. The point is, how do you actually survive, I would say, strong presentation attack, somebody who really tries to go through the system. So just to zoom out a bit, we decided to use combination of facial biometrics with SMS OTP because we wanted to make the process as simple as possible for the user to only use something that the user has. And we selected such facial biometric system that actually was able to provide some, let's say, guarantees or biometric performance characteristics of how it works. And maybe one more comment to it. Facial biometrics currently provide really good protection from attacks like phishing or wishing or those social engineering attacks. That's one of the additional security benefits. But we are actually moving towards like really looking into performance of facial biometrics and how good the particular solution works now, because the future doesn't look very good. Just as you said, it's really easy not to only implement some really crappy facial biometrics, so the market is kind of flooded with vendors providing this, but it's really easy to create a deep fake and actually attack the facial biometrics, and it will only get worse, I think.
Thank you for that. And I think you've pulled out a couple of very, very important points there. The ease of creation of the deepfakes, the ease of creation of AI video pretending to be somebody, particularly where you've not met that person. It's hyper realistic these days, and indeed, you just can't tell, at least in my opinion, you cannot tell the difference by eye anymore. I think what's interesting is you comment on the testing as well. We see a lot of organizations around the world test systems, some very well, some not so well. And I think one of the key takeaways for me of all the testing I've seen taking place is it's a lot easier to claim to protect against deepfakes on PowerPoint than perhaps it is to actually do it in the real world when the criminals are testing you. And we've been fortunate enough that, to have some of our government customers, for example, employ exceptionally talented security organizations to spend in excess of 12 months continuously trying to spoof and break our platform as part of a grey box security testing. And it's that level of testing where you can really tell what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, just very briefly on your good observation that people aren't really able to tell. That's because we are not built to tell. We are, self-correcting creatures. We are trying to find some consistency in our patterns. So, for example, if we have seen organizations just using like optical comparison by humans instead of optical comparison by machines. And it is no longer a better way to do it. Whenever you capture, for example, personal ID, you should always use some like machine to compare people to the expected photo. Just a quick comment on it. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Vratislav, you're going to now tell us a lot more about Raiffeisenbank's extremely successful, if I may say so, rollout of the iProov technology. and how you've used the biometric solution to enhance your, particularly the reactivation of a customer account, and also talk about the customer satisfaction you've seen on the back of that.
Yeah, yeah, I will. Yeah, we'll just put the slides on. Yeah, well, it's just maybe something to introduce myself a little bit more. I'm working in banking area for about 23 years. Most of it I'm in Raiffeisenbank. Before I work in Česká spořitelna, and I was there when there were some beginnings of online banking applications. So it's really many years ago. But I'm the whole time working in what we call right now digital or online banking or direct banking channels. These days, I'm more focusing on customer experience, and also we are using agile principles in developing mobile apps. So these are like domains that I'm focusing on now. I'm not a security specialist, but yeah, I will try to tell you something from the business perspective, how I judge the process that we created together also with Wultra and with iProov. So Peter already told many things that I want to mention. But before the 2022, before this year, most of the activation of our mobile banking app were done in internet banking. Actually, our users had two options. They could go to the branch and personally make an activation there. So it was usually for the new customers, but the current customers, they asked for some online process, something that they can do from home. So the second process was via internet banking, but already Peter mentioned, and it was a pretty smooth process because user logged into the internet banking via SMS OTP, put some PIN, and they could create a new activation on new device, and they could start to use mobile banking. But yeah, what happened? The attackers found that this process is could be somehow used, and they start to using it really a lot. So they persuaded the customers that they are from bank or from police or something like this, and they persuaded them to give them access to the internet banking and to activate remotely the mobile banking on the device of the attacker. So this was really a huge problem for us. So we at first the first thing that we did was that we put to the confirmation on the client side that he's activating the mobile banking. We put the screen with the warning, hey, be aware, this is something that is usually used by attackers. Are you really wanting to activate the mobile banking? Like really a new screen. And we thought, well, this must stop the attackers, and it will be fine. Actually, it worked. First month, it really dropped down the attackers, but they were able to react, and over this screen, the customers still activated the mobile banking on the device of the attackers. So, and even when we asked them, hey, you didn't saw the screen? Why did you put the activation? And they said, well, I thought it's not my case. You know, he was really persuaded. So yeah, it was we did it. Yeah. So we said, okay, we will have to do something else, and that's why we started to think about the new process of reactivation that will be only in mobile, so not using any other channel like internet banking. Definitely, we wanted this process to be really secure and also convenient. Also, we knew that this process will not be for the 100% of activations that are available. So we knew that it's not every user will be eligible for this. So we wanted to have, like, I don't know, 75% at least eligible users for this reactivation of process. Still, new activations are done mostly in branch, or they are done during the online onboarding or digitally established accounts. But yeah, for the reactivation, we said, okay, we must find something new. During the time, we had to stop giving possibility to activate mobile banking via internet banking, because we said, okay, like this is too much. The attackers are stealing a lot of money like this from our customers. So we hide the possibility of activate mobile banking via internet banking in autumn, and I think it was October 2022. And already during this process, we already started to work on something new. We had in mind like two processes. One is not using iProov actually, so I will just briefly say what it is, and I will then focus to the second one. The first is to move the activation from one device to another. So it's really easy when the customer buys a new device, then he has already the mobile banking activated on one device. There is like the biggest issue, like how to find out that the devices are really on one place. So we were scanning QR code in this process. There was no need of some facial biometry. But yeah, the scanning QR code was fine. But again, attackers find some way how to use it, because our customers were able to send them the photo of the QR code and so on. But yeah, so we also put one additional thing, and it was a Bluetooth check. And right now it's a process that is really working very well, and we are using it, or our customers are using it a lot. So this was the first process, the transfer of activation from one device to another. And the second reactivation process I will talk about was usually for the customers that lost the mobile. They already used the mobile banking, they lost it, or somehow it was put to the initial setup or something like that. Yeah, the device had to be rebooted, or yeah, completely new. So this process, we said, okay, it must be secure. We must be really sure that it's the customer. So we are using, as Peter mentioned, SMS OTP. Then there is scanning of IDs, and the third like very useful factor is the facial biometry, comparing with the photo on the ID. So this is quite a robust process. But yeah, we launched it in spring 2023. So there were like about 6 months when our customers who wanted to reactivate had to go to the branch. So it was really a pain, and you know, there were a lot of visits on branch just to do the activation of the mobile banking. But since then the situation improved really a lot. Yeah. Peter will talk more about it. We'll show you the process. So now I will just skip to some numbers. I think because I think it's also quite interesting. Actually, Raiffeisen have about 1.1 million mobile banking active users every month. They are logging to our application, and this need of reactivation or making some activation of mobile banking every month, almost 50,000 of customers needs to reactivate the mobile banking. So it's really a huge number. about 4% of customers has to reactivate the mobile banking every month. Yeah. As I mentioned, we have two processes. About 25,000 of users is moving the activation from one device to another using the QR code and Bluetooth check. And another from 10 to 12,000 is successfully using the reactivation, using the ID scan and the biometric check with iProov. Another 15,000 usually goes to branch, but it's mostly the people who are not Czech citizens, so we cannot scan their IDs, or our system doesn't support the IDs of other countries. It's only for Czech Republic citizens, or these are people who are older and are not so digitally active or available to do this. So that's about the process, and I think now I will put the word to Petr just to show us how it really works, and then we can talk about a little bit more.
Awesome, thank you, Rátio. I will take over the process. So basically, what you will see now is how an existing customer of Raiffeisenbank can reactivate mobile banking from the comfort of their home through personal ID and facial biometrics. So the overview of the process is basically the following. In the beginning, we ask the customer to weekly identify themselves, like provide a client number, date of birth, and then we have one SMS OTP mainly as a measure of, let's say, throttling prevention, just to make sure that we are not flooded with random requests to reactivate the flow. Then the customer can set up the PIN code and Face ID, which is essentially a way how we link the device to their account. But the customer is still unverified. It is still a very weakly identified user. Then in the next stage, we will ask the customer to provide the consent with verification, because we are dealing with biometrics and we want to make sure that people are comfortable with the process and with what's going to happen. Then there is a requirement to scan at least 2 documents. It can be a personal ID and either passport or driver's license. And then we have to perform SCA. So under PSD2, whenever we reactivate mobile banking, we actually need to do it through strong customer authentication, because it actually makes sense to enroll strong customer authentication only if the enrollment is as strong as it needs to be. And currently our authentication code is consisted of verification by iProov, basically the token associated with this verification, and the SMS OTP that we are using as a second one. So we have 2 SMS OTPs in the flow actually, one basically as a throttling mechanism, and the second one as part of strong customer authentication. So the process, when it's described like this, seems a bit longer, but it can be done actually in a minute or so, relatively quickly. And I will now hopefully start the video for you to actually show you how it works. So wait a second. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So now on the first step, as I mentioned, people will enter their client number and date of birth. This is basically just weak identification of the customer. And they use the first SMS OTP, basically the throttling mechanism that I mentioned. They can now set up the PIN code. That's a new PIN code they select. Of course, I selected 1234, so I received the proper warning, and I activated Face ID. And now we are going to the consent stage and document validation. So the first one, we are scanning an ID card from one side and from the other side. Actually, Czech ID card has 2 sides to scan, and driver's license, which is the second document, we only require one side of the document just to compare that everything matches. So after both of the documents are verified and we extract all the data and verify they match the customer, we actually go through selfie verification handled by iProov with the familiar user interface and color flashing to provide this additional protection caused by this challenge response mechanism. and we have the other SMS OTP code as a part of strong customer authentication with fully activated mobile banking. Just to mention, if either iProov verification or SMS OTP fails in the second stage, we go through the entire SCA process again, because we need to make both of these factors independent, so we never tell which of the factors actually fail during the process. So something like minute and 20 seconds, relatively comfortable. You can make it basically as soon as you get home.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much. I think it's probably just worth dwelling for a second on, the use of the on-device biometrics, the use of Face ID or indeed fingerprint, depending on the device, versus the use of a cloud-based biometric system such as iProov, because I think this is something which is quite widely misunderstood. So I'm just going to explain the differences as we see them between those, if I can. I actually learned this one the hard way a number of years ago when I discovered that my daughter, who was about 13 at the time, had registered her fingerprint on my phone so she could unlock it. Not maliciously. She knew my PIN number anyway, and so she could unlock the phone. But because she knew the PIN number, she registered a fingerprint to make her life easy for herself. And I was completely unaware of this for about 12 to 18 months. So if you think that through, what it actually means is when you're unlocking a phone with a fingerprint or indeed with your face using the on-device biometrics, what you're really proving is not in some ways biometrics, it's proof of knowledge. It's proof of knowledge of the unlock code of the phone at a point in time. Because if you know that unlock code, you can add your face or add your finger to it. And indeed, the bank application or indeed the phone operating system itself does not tell you which one of the two fingerprints or two faces enrolled in it was used to unlock it. And this was something that certainly brought it home to me very, very heavily. The other thing which I think is worth dwelling on there is the inclusivity. Perhaps you could just expand a bit on that. In iProov, we're very, very proud and spend a lot of time making sure that we work across a vast range of devices. I think at the last count, we'd now worked on more than 27,000 different makes and models of Android device around the world. So from the very, very highest end, latest devices down to some very, very cheap $20 Android handsets. How did that fit into your decision criteria? Is this something that's important to Wultra and to Raiffeisen? Petra?
Well, Petra, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, sure. So essentially, we wanted to make sure that people are actually able to use the process, right? That's fairly important because we were dealing with the situation that we had to shut down activation in the internet banking and essentially ask people to visit branch or go through reactivation, which cannot be always done with, through this device transfer, which you cannot always do if you do not have the second device. So from our perspective, we really wanted to have a high success rate of facial biometrics. It's actually really easy to achieve high success rate. You just can't let anybody in, which is not what you necessarily want. You also have to have a good catch rate for the criminals who are trying to get in. And basically what we can see now is that the success rate of iProov is extremely high in a real world scenario of Raiffeisenbank. I think that the success rate is around 97, 98% on average, basically very close to letting the legitimate customers in when they get through facial biometrics. I think that the main funnel barrier currently is on document scanning. It's a bit cumbersome. We are looking for ways to improve that, but still the process actually helps quite a lot. We didn't want to implement something which would actually fail in the end, because if you start the reactivation process and it fails several times, it becomes extremely frustrating. It's probably even better to ask people to go to the branch because they will be annoyed, but kind of accept this situation, then let them go through some process repeatedly and then fail at home. That's quite interesting. I would say psychological factor, because they will give you one-star review. They are already holding the phone in their hands. And from our perspective as a company, let me also mention that we are currently operating worldwide in 20 countries. So of course we are looking for a solution that that is able to cover broader geography, not just Central Europe, but regions like Southeast Asia or Africa or Latin America, basically any geography.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a few questions come in now, so let's take a little segue and answer some of those. Question is, what if a client does not remember the client number? Is this easy to find, or is there some sort of backup route?
Yeah, it's something that our customers are usually asking us. Originally, the client number he gets on the branch. On the branch, they usually put something that that customer knows about himself. So something that because it's quite a long number, I think at least 6 digits, and it's usually a number. So they put there something that the customer knows. Yeah, I will not say more in detail, but so it's very important for us to know for the customers to remember this client ID. And then we also put it to the mobile banking where we can look at it. But usually when he goes to this process, it's predicted that he doesn't have access to mobile banking. So we are trying to do everything to get to know what is his client number. But yeah, it happens. Sometimes customers doesn't know what his client ID is, and he also uses for every login to internet banking. So in the past, almost every customer knew his client ID because the internet banking, as Peter mentioned, was the primary channel how he got to his accounts and so on. But now as the time is changing and he's using mostly the mobile banking, he doesn't need this client number for login to mobile banking. Yeah, so it's something that he doesn't use on daily basis. So some users forget this client number.
Great. There's also a couple of specific iProov questions, so I'll quickly answer those. The question is the iProov verification a video or sequence of photos? It's actually a very short video. It's about 28 frames of video taken over about 2.5 seconds, which is then uploaded. That's really designed to minimize the amount of data that has to be uploaded from a handset to allow it to work on both cheap handsets, but also in poor network connectivity. And then there's a question, are we talking about 2D or 3D Face ID as biometrics? They're saying there's a big difference in how it's done technically, for example, from a picture on cheap devices versus, for example, on an Apple phone with dedicated hardware, which can use infrared to do a 3D mapping of a face. Very simply, we believe we have the best of both here because we work across all the devices, including the cheap devices. And that allows it to be inclusive and used rather than just on phones with dedicated hardware. So we have no reliance on dedicated hardware, such as infrared scanners, primarily because only a very small percentage of mobile phones have those. So we can work across all mobile phones, both across native on iOS and Android, but also on web, again, across iOS, Android, but also desktop and the laptop, such as I'm on. But importantly, the way we make use of what we call flash marks, so the reflection of light off a face, allows us to drive a level of security, which is why we get the national security grade certifications we have and the customer base we have across both the financial sector with banks such as Raiffeisenbank and many other banks all around the world, as well as our government customers, because driving that level of security, even if it's coming from the low-end device, is very important. Moving on, perhaps you could talk to us about some of the decision criteria you made when choosing a biometric solution, and indeed perhaps expand on it. By now you've been using the solution for a longer period of time. what it is that people should be looking for to guarantee the levels of security. Petra, do you want to start on that?
Sure, I will start with it. I think that essentially you want to have some performance characteristics of your biometric provider. False acceptance rate and false rejection rate are the very basics, but they are not very helpful. You should be looking for metrics like APTSER and BAPTSER, which are slightly better. You should definitely look for certifications and ISO standards on the slide deck. Ideally, certification by IBETA or similar certification body. I think that the problem that we currently have as a vendor of, I would say, more solution-oriented product, we are providing the full authentication package for the bank, is that there are so many providers currently doing seemingly the same product. And so when you have this red ocean of providers, you really need to be able to compare them by quality. Sometimes what we noticed is that people do not really know how to do it. We will be happy to advise with it, how to actually compare different biometric solutions and what different metrics mean. And answers, it works, we tested it, are sometimes not very sufficient. And finally, what I think is that there are two, I would say, giveaway to a good or bad facial biometrics provider. One is the solution running in the cloud or is it on-premise, right? Because we see quite a lot of on-premise solutions being deployed, and then the question becomes, how do you update it? How do you react to a new deepfake presentation attack? How do you make sure that you are following the best practices? What if you see some new type of attack in Southeast Asia, which will be in 3 months in Central Europe, right? So I would say that currently cloud-based providers are the way to go because of things like that. It is very quickly evolving, and it's always easier to just, let's say, rely on fast update in the cloud rather than handle all the redeployment and analysis yourself. And the second one, which is kind of counterintuitive, is the way how liveness is performed, because we can see two types of liveness. One is liveness which is active. It involves some proactive activity by the user, like please look left, please look right, now smile and blink, which seems more secure, but it really isn't. It forces the user in a not very natural position and not natural behavior. So what we actually like to see is passive liveness, where we, or rather the biometric provider, in this case iProov, ensures that they look for natural behavior of the person and natural sign of how the person behaves in front of the camera, rather than really, doing this exercise, which is slightly unpleasant for the user anyway. So these would be my tips for how to actually pick a good provider.
I think that's an excellent summary. And if I can just add a little to that, there's some very important certifications out there. So, for example, the FIDO Alliance has relatively recently launched a very strong standard to do with biometric onboarding. And I'd certainly encourage people to look for that standard. That extensive external laboratory test of the environment is required to pass that. And in terms of the so-called active, where you have to, nod your head, shake it, whatever, smile, whatever it may be. The challenge there is that it's hard for perhaps some people to do, but actually it's very, very easy for an attacker to do these days using deepfakes. So in some ways, it almost makes it easier for the attacker than it can do for some of the population if you're trying to be fully inclusive. Vacislav, is there anything you'd like to add from Raiffeisen? They are your customers. What was important to you when choosing the iProov solution, and how would you guide your industry colleagues listening to this call?
As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm also focusing on customer experience. So this was very, very important for us. When I saw for the first time iProov, I was a little bit afraid of clicking and all the things that it's doing, but we did some research, some testing, and it really is not a problem. as I see also now from the feedback from customers, they don't tell us that this is something that maybe they are for the first time, they are a little surprised, but it's not something that they seem that it's something wrong or not pleasant. Yeah. So this is very, very important for me. And maybe I will mention one factor which maybe was not so important when we were selecting the partner, but it's the ease of implementation. I have to say, in the process, we also had one SDK from another partner for the scanning of IDs, and even from our developers, they said that to implement iProov was really very great. The documentation was very, very good and precise, and they got all the information to implement it very, very easily. And even on testing, there were not like the big issues with it. Yeah. So and even now when we are cooperating for longer time, we just update the SDK version, and it really works. We don't have to solve any issues and so on. So I have to say that also from this point of view, the iProov is really a great partner.
Great, we thank you for that. Petra, you commented on the cloud versus on-prem. I'd just like to add a little to that, if I may. You know, people talk about how do you update it, and I think people think about this as maybe being a software release that's once a month, once a quarter. The world of liveness, world of biometric authentication and liveness for face just does not operate on those timescales anymore, because the criminals do not operate on those timescales. The fraudsters certainly do not operate on those timescales. And you know, one of the things that Raiffeisen will benefit from here, and all iProov's customers benefit from here, is the cadence of releases and software updates we do. I think we're all used these days to having on our laptops, to having on our endpoints, you know, antivirus, anti-malware, endpoint protection that is being updated on a regular basis, you know, daily, 4 hourly, maybe even every hour. And the iProov biometric solution works in a very similar way. The back-end service, the SaaS service, which Raiffeisen and our other customers use, is getting updated with tests on average more than once a day throughout the year. So as we see new attacks and new attack variants in perhaps South America, they appear very, very fast in other parts of the world. And you know, the ability for us to globally update the platform on a daily basis and keep the platform up to date and keep it ahead of the attackers without having to do software releases, and for the customers then to have to test those software releases, but rather iProov to guarantee the stability of the service, the availability of the service, and make this transparent, is in my mind a key feature of the service. That, coupled with the fact it allows threat monitoring and actually the monitoring of attacks against the service. You know, sometimes it's easy to say, yeah, the service is working. But if you haven't got a team of people looking at the biometric attacks against the service, then it's very, very difficult to know if that's the case or not. Moving on, let's talk about very specific Raiffeisen's experience. Could you talk a little bit about any KPIs used to measure the success of it? And indeed, if there's any lessons you learned from the rollout that you wish you'd known before starting the process?
I will leave this one to you, Vrátil. Could you go for it?
Okay, yeah. Well, KPIs. We definitely, as I mentioned, we wanted to move the people from branches to the online, so that they were able to successfully make the reactivation by themselves. So this was really very important for us. You saw that the process is not very easy. It has quite a lot of screens, and there is quite a lot of checks and verifications in the process. So when we look at the funnel right now, we see that there is a lot of people who is leaving this process during it. Yeah. So it like, I don't know, only about 22 or 24% of customer is able to get to the successful end. Yeah, so we are still looking at it. What are the reasons why are they not able to finish the process? So we are looking to the process as a whole, and yeah. To be honest, like the 24 or 22% of success rate, it's not something awesome. Yeah? So we are looking how to improve the process. But if I look only separately to iProov, then it's really, I think that this biometry is doing what it should. So we don't see that there is a really huge problem. The problem is usually before they got to this stage when they identify the biometry or see themselves. So for us, it was crucial to put the people from branches to online, and I think it works. It works pretty well. Yeah, there is still a lot of people who is able to reactivate the mobile banking activation as themselves.
Maybe to add a bit from our side, we didn't really have like KPIs because this is different for different customers. What we can see is that some customers have unfair advantage, for example, in having like a local official government database of facial biometrics that we can leverage. So the process can be as easy as just entering some unified number used across different applications and just use facial authentication. In the Czech Republic, unfortunately, we still have to mine physical documents to obtain the reference picture. So that's where we have the most of the drop-off. But from our perspective, we wanted to make a process which is phishing resistant, something that cannot be, the process cannot be completed only by replicating the process on some fake website. We wanted to have something that makes branches happier. In case of Raiffeisen, I think that especially after, I'll say, 3 or 4 months of branch-only activations, the staff at branches was a bit annoyed by just reactivating mobile applications over and over again. And this actually helped quite a lot. And we also wanted to include facial biometrics in our proposition because there are more things that we can do with it once we have it in the overall building block. So currently, I mentioned that we are using facial biometrics by iProov for digital onboarding and reactivation. At some point, we will be using it for other use cases, such as authentication step-up in case of suspected fraud, confirmation of some specific transactions, like a loan initiation, when we want to make sure that we have some strong proof of the user who really initiated the transaction. Maybe some logins will be randomly selected to actually go through facial biometrics, maybe the first login after the activation, and so on and so on. So for us, it's not really about like this is done, we have finished, it's already implemented, there is nothing more to follow up on. We are looking in the future and what we can do more with the solution.
Very quick question from the chat. We've been asking what types of IDs does Raiffeisen support for verification?
I think Petr already mentioned it. It's always it's ID. It's Czech Republic ID only is supported right now, and then we ask for one additional, and it's either passport or driving license.
Yeah, I will maybe complement this answer because we actually get this question from a slightly different angle. So let me just mention that iProov only provides facial biometrics. We provide, there are some vendors who actually do this bundled solution with the document scanning and facial biometrics. And then there is a question about what documents are supported in the solution from a geographical coverage, for example. So when we implement document recognition, we typically work with either the provider selected by the bank, which in case of Raiffeisenbank was the case. We are working with the document scan, which was already in place for other use cases. Or we are working with Microblink, which is another, so sorry for mentioning another vendor on the podcast, on a webinar, but we are basically, again, choosing the industry leader with the broadest coverage of documents worldwide.
Yeah. So there's a question in the chat which I'll answer, which is around, fallbacks. For example, could you do an iProov after heavy fitness or exercise, or is there a pin? Rather than answering specifically Raiffeisen, things like heavy exercise, or indeed facial hair or jewelry, or not using the system for a long period of time, or wearing glasses, as long as they're not big reflective sunglasses, actually makes no difference to the success rates of the system whatsoever. We have customers around the world who use this across many use cases where people are using this on a daily basis. In terms of fallback, that very much is customer specific and has to be customer and use case specific. But Petra, I think you talked about some of the other use cases which you could see using facial biometrics for. And I think it's just worth reflecting in a moment just how many opportunities this strong facial liveness opens up. If I can just give one example, and if I talk about Singapore for a second, Singapore has a national identity scheme called SingPass, which is one of the leading national identity schemes in the world in terms of security and completeness. And recently in Singapore, we've seen that the Monetary Authority of Singapore has recently enforced that all banks, that if you are creating a digital token on a mobile device, then you must use SingPass facial biometrics to do that. The reason for that is, very much the way iProov works. We're data-driven, we're numbers-driven. And what the mass saw was the security that's driven by the SingPass scheme has actually reduced fraud and reduces fraud for the Singaporean citizens in a great way. So in very much the same way, Raiffeisenbank, as you as an organization have decided to do this, and we've seen other banks decide to do this with forward thinking for themselves, we're actually starting to see this appear in legislation and regulation around the world as now. I'm conscious of time. I think we've answered all the questions in the chat. If there are any more and would like to ask a last minute question, then please do so now. Petra, in 60 seconds, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, maybe I will just mention what Raja already said one more time. For us as a technology vendor, it was really easy to implement facial biometrics by iProov. I want to really highlight it. You can actually look at the SDKs on GitHub. They have public documentation. So from our perspective, I really appreciate this openness. We are looking in the future, and hopefully this deepfake world that we are heading towards will not move too fast. But still, it's actually good to have somebody who is active, proactive, a little bit ahead of fraudsters, and if not ahead, catching up very quickly. So just a couple of comments from me to ease of implementation and, let's say, this trust that we can put to iProov as our partner.
And Raiffeisenbank, same question.
Yeah, I just want to mention that we are very happy that this process that we created together with Wultra and iProov is very secure. Maybe it's not so convenient for our customers, as I mentioned, the rate of the success rate of users, but it is very secure. And from this point of view, it's very important for us at the moment. And as Petr mentioned, we will see what other challenges will bring out the future, because we know that this maybe doesn't belong for forever. Yeah, so let's see for the future, but at the moment it works very well.
Don't worry about the process. I think that we will improve it. iProov is fine. We have one step with very high pass-through rate, and we will just focus on the other steps to make it 89% success rate for sure.
That's great. Thank you both for that. Thought I'd like to leave people with, if I may, is that the opportunity that's given by facial biometrics with strong liveness is exactly to secure remotely, very securely, an identity in an untrusted environment. So rather than the customer having to be in the branch to get them to the level of trust you have. If you have an image of a person from when they opened an account, if you have an image of the person from some other source you trust, you can remotely gain that level of trust in a device-independent way. Again, this could be on a new device, on iOS, on Android, or indeed in a web session. And with that, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you again shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.